They say weddings are about love, joy, and forever. But what if the man waiting at the altar was hiding a past so dark it could get everyone in the church killed? This isn't just a wedding story. This is the day love collided with a deadly secret. Sarah was getting married today. She was so happy and excited. The church looked beautiful with flowers everywhere. Sunlight came through the big windows and made pretty colors on the floor. Sarah wore her grandmother's white dress. She looked like a princess. Her heart was beating fast because she was about to marry the man of her dreams, David. David walked into the church wearing a nice black suit. He was tall and handsome with brown hair. Sarah thought he was perfect. They had been together for 3 years and she loved him so much. But something was wrong. David looked nervous, really nervous, more nervous than most men on their wedding day. Pastor Johnson stood at the front of the church. He was an old man who had done hundreds of weddings, but today felt different. Something about David made him feel worried, but he didn't know why. The wedding started. Pastor Johnson said the words he always said. Sarah said her promises to David. Her voice was shaking because she was so happy. "I promise to love you forever," she said with tears in her eyes. "I promise to stay with you no matter what happens." Then it was David's turn. But when he spoke, something was wrong. His words sounded fake, like he was reading from a script. His smile didn't look real. "I promise to keep you safe from all the bad things in the world," David said. Pastor Johnson thought this was strange. Why did David talk about keeping her safe from bad things? Most men talked about being happy together. Then Pastor Johnson saw something that made his blood turn cold. When David lifted his hand, his shirt moved up a little bit. Pastor Johnson saw a tattoo on David's wrist. It wasn't just any tattoo. It was a dangerous tattoo. A snake wrapped around a knife with numbers under it. Pastor Johnson knew what this meant because he used to help soldiers many years ago. This tattoo belonged to a secret group of soldiers. These soldiers did terrible things. They killed people. They did missions that nobody was supposed to know about. Pastor Johnson's hands started shaking. The nice man standing in front of him wasn't really David Lancaster. He was someone else. Pastor Johnson didn't know what to do. Should he stop the wedding? Should he tell Sarah? His heart was beating so fast. He tried to keep going with the wedding, but he couldn't stop looking at that tattoo. David noticed him staring and gave him a look that was scary. It was like David was warning him to keep quiet. The people in the church started to feel that something was wrong. They began whispering to each other. Sarah's mom looked worried. When it came time to put on the wedding rings, Pastor Johnson made a big decision. He stepped back from Sarah and David. "I need to talk to the man getting married," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Right now, alone." Everyone in the church gasped. Sarah's face went white. Her flowers were shaking in her hands. "What's happening?" Sarah asked. But Pastor Johnson was already taking David to a small room behind the church. The little room was dark and quiet. Pastor Johnson closed the door and looked at David with serious eyes. "I know who you really are," Pastor Johnson said. "That tattoo on your wrist. You're not David Lancaster. You're a soldier who did bad things." David's nice guy act fell apart. His whole body changed. Now he looked like the dangerous man he really was. "You weren't supposed to see that," David said quietly. "I thought I hid it well enough." "Did you?" Pastor Johnson asked. "Or did your dangerous past follow you here? To this sweet girl who thinks you sell computers for work?" David put his head in his hands. "My real name is Marcus Kane. I was part of a secret army group. We did things that I can't even talk about. But I'm not that person anymore. I've been trying to be good for 3 years." "And the people you worked for?" Pastor Johnson asked. "Do they know where you are?" Marcus looked scared. "They've been looking for me. I thought I was safe, but..." He pointed toward the church door where Sarah was waiting. "There's someone here, isn't there?" Pastor Johnson said. "Someone from your old life?" "Her name is Elena," Marcus whispered. "She was my boss. If she found me, it means they know everything. About Sarah, about our life, about today." Pastor Johnson felt cold. "What does she want? To take me back? Or to kill me?" Marcus said with no emotion in his voice. Our group broke up after we did something really bad. Now they're getting rid of everyone who knows their secrets." Through the small window, Pastor Johnson could see Sarah in her white dress, looking confused and scared. All the people in the church were talking and pointing. "You have to tell her the truth," Pastor Johnson said. "She needs to know who you really are and that she might be in danger." Marcus shook his head hard. "I can't. Do you know what I've done? The people who are dead because of me? She thinks I'm this nice guy who brings her coffee every morning. If she knew what I really am, if she knew the truth, she could decide for herself," Pastor Johnson said. "Right now, you're making the choice for her. That's not love. That's control." Before Marcus could answer, they heard a soft knock on the door. Sarah's voice came through, and she sounded like she was crying. "David? Pastor Johnson? Please tell me what's wrong. Everyone is asking questions and I don't know what to say." Marcus closed his eyes. When he opened them, Pastor Johnson didn't see the nice man anymore. He saw the killer underneath. "There's a woman in black sitting in the back of the church," Marcus said quietly. "She has gray hair and a scar on her face. That's Elena. She's been watching us, waiting for the right time to attack." Pastor Johnson felt sick. "Attack? Here? In God's house? She won't care about hurting innocent people to get to me," Marcus said. "That's what we were taught to do. Get the job done, no matter what." Another knock on the door. Harder this time. "Please?" Sarah's voice was breaking. "I'm so scared." Marcus looked at the door, then at Pastor Johnson. "If I tell her the truth, I'll lose her. But if I don't," he ran his hands through his hair, "Elena won't wait much longer. She'll do something soon, and Sarah will get hurt. Then we end this right now," Pastor Johnson said with a strong voice. "We go out there, you tell Sarah everything, and we face whatever happens together." Marcus stared at him. "You don't understand. These people don't leave anyone alive to tell stories. If Elena thinks Sarah knows too much, then we make sure she never gets that chance," Pastor Johnson said. "I may talk about God and peace, but I've seen enough evil to know that sometimes we have to fight it." They opened the door and found Sarah standing there with tears on her face. Behind her, people were running out of the church, and in the back row, exactly where Marcus said she would be, sat a woman with gray hair and cold, mean eyes. Elena had come to take Marcus back. "Sarah," Marcus said, taking her hands, "I have to tell you something that will change everything between us." She looked up at him, and for the first time, she saw past his nice act to the dangerous man hiding underneath. "Who are you?" she whispered. "My name is Marcus Kane," he said. 3 years ago, I was part of a secret army group that did terrible things. I came here to hide and become someone new, but my past found me." Sarah's eyes got big. "Secret army? You mean like a soldier?" "Worse than that," Marcus said. "We were like ghosts. We didn't officially exist, and neither did our missions. Now the people who made us want to erase all the proof, starting with me." Sarah looked from Marcus to Pastor Johnson, hoping someone would tell her this was all a big mistake, but Pastor Johnson's serious face told her it was all true. "The woman in the back," Marcus continued. "She's here to take me back, or to kill me, and anyone who might be able to point her out later." Right then, Elena stood up and started walking toward them. She moved like a cat hunting a mouse, and people got out of her way without knowing why. "Sarah," Marcus said fast, "I need you to hide behind the altar and stay down. Whatever happens next, don't try to help." But Sarah surprised them both. Instead of hiding, she stood up straight and moved closer to Marcus. "If this is who you really are, then this is who I'm choosing to marry. I don't care about your past. I care about the man you are now." Marcus stared at her like he couldn't believe it. "You don't understand what you're saying." "I understand perfectly," Sarah said. "You could have kept running, but you stayed here with me. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are." Elena was getting closer, and Pastor Johnson could see a gun hidden under her coat. The people still in the church were starting to panic. "Marcus," Elena called out in a loud voice, "time to come home." Marcus stepped in front of Sarah to protect her. "I am home, Elena. This is where I belong." Elena smiled, but it was a scary smile. You know I can't let that happen. Too many people know your face now. Too many loose ends to tie up. The only loose end here is you, Marcus said back, and suddenly Pastor Johnson could see the trained killer he used to be. I left that life behind. I'm not going back. Then you've made your choice, Elena said, reaching for her gun. But Marcus was faster. He grabbed a heavy gold candlestick from the altar and threw it at Elena. She dodged it easily, but it gave Marcus enough time to push Sarah behind the altar where she'd be safe. The church filled with screams as the last people ran for the doors. Pastor Johnson dropped behind his podium, his heart beating so fast as he watched the fight. Elena had her gun out now, a black pistol with something on the end to make it quiet. You always were the best of us, Marcus, but caring about people has made you weak. Maybe, Marcus said, moving slowly around the altar, but it's also given me something worth fighting for. The two fighters faced each other across the church. Years of working together and then betraying each other hung heavy in the air. Elena raised her gun, but before she could shoot, Sarah's voice rang out, clear and strong. Stop! She stood up from behind the altar, ignoring Marcus, trying to get her to stay down. I don't know what happened between you two, but this is supposed to be a place of peace and love. Whatever fight you're having doesn't belong here. Elena looked at her like she thought it was funny. How sweet. The innocent bride trying to save her monster husband. He's not a monster, Sarah said firmly. Monsters don't spend 3 years learning how to love someone gently. Monsters don't bring coffee every morning and remember your favorite flowers. Whatever he was before, he chose to be different now. For a second, Elena stopped, but then her training kicked in, and she pointed the gun at Sarah. Then you'll die together. Marcus moved faster than seemed possible, throwing himself between Elena and Sarah just as she fired. The bullet hit him in the shoulder, spinning him around, but he managed to tackle Elena before she could shoot again. They crashed into the front bench, fighting with moves that looked like a deadly dance. Elena was good, but Marcus fought like a man, protecting everything he loved most. Pastor Johnson had pressed the church's emergency button, sending silent alarms to the police. Help was coming, but would it get there in time? The fight between Marcus and Elena went all across the front of the church. They were both too good, too well trained. Neither could win. But then Sarah did something no one expected. She picked up the heavy golden cross from the altar and hit Elena's wrist hard, just as she was about to shoot Marcus up close. Elena screamed in pain as her gun slid across the floor. That's for ruining my wedding, Sarah said angrily. Elena held her broken wrist, her face twisted with rage and pain. You have no idea what you've done. What he's done. The blood on his hands is in the past, Sarah interrupted, and the future is what we make it. Police sirens were getting louder outside. Elena looked from Marcus to Sarah, figuring out if she could still escape. With her gun gone and her wrist broken, things had changed completely. This isn't over, she growled at Marcus. They'll send others. They'll never stop hunting you. Then we'll be ready, Marcus replied, Sarah's hand finding his even though blood was coming through his shirt. Together. Elena backed toward the side door. She had failed, but she was still alive to tell her bosses what happened. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. Enjoy your happiness while it lasts, she said. It won't be long. Then she was gone, disappearing as police cars filled the parking lot. Police and paramedics rushed into the church. The paramedics started taking care of Marcus's shoulder while Pastor Johnson told the police what happened. Sarah held Marcus's good hand and wouldn't let go. So what happens now? Sarah asked as the paramedics worked. Do we run away? Do we hide? Marcus looked at her, amazed by how brave she was. We live, he said simply. We get married, we build our life together, and we face whatever comes. But Sarah, you need to understand. This won't be the last time. Elena was right about that. Sarah squeezed his hand tighter. Then we'll face it together, all of it. The past, the future, the danger, the love, everything. Pastor Johnson came over to them as the paramedics finished. Well, he said with a tired smile, that was definitely the most exciting wedding I've ever done. Should we try again next week?" Sarah and Marcus looked at each other and started laughing, the kind of crazy, relieved laughter that comes after surviving something terrible together. "Actually," Sarah said, "I think we already said everything that needed to be said. Pastor Johnson, would you marry us right now?" The pastor looked around at the messed up benches, the blood on the floor, and all the chaos. Then he looked at the couple in front of him, a man trying to escape his dark past, and the woman brave enough to love him anyway. "The power given to me by God," he said seriously. "I now say you are husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Their kiss was gentle and full of promise for a future they would build together, no matter what shadows might come. As they walked out of the church, holding hands, Sarah turned to her new husband. "So, Marcus Kane," she said, trying out his real name, "what do we do now?" He smiled at her, and for the first time in 3 years, it was completely real. "We live, Sarah Kane. We live beautifully and completely together, and we show the world that love can change even the darkest past into the brightest future." Pastor Johnson locked the church doors and shook his head. In all his years of doing weddings, he had never seen anything like this, but he had also never seen love win over darkness quite so powerfully. As he watched the newlyweds drive away into their uncertain but hopeful future, he said a prayer for their safety and smiled. Sometimes, the most powerful force in the world really is love. If this crazy story kept you watching until the end, smash that like button and tell me in the comments what you think happened next. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. What would you do if you found out your perfect partner had a dangerous secret? Let me know below.